Alright? Now, my tier list just recently added the matchups into consideration for the rankings. And while it wasn't impactful for several junglers, it was for a small number of them, most noticeably Cho'Gath and Lee Sin. Now, what makes me qualified to say to give scores for matchups? Well, it makes me as qualified as most of you, because while some of you may not want to admit it, you all have your own little tier list and matchup charts in your own head. You all say like, oh, I think Udyr is better than X champion or whatever. Like, you grade them. You say X character is better than X character, and you have your reasons for believing so. And I know some others do this, I try to base mine off experience and honesty and numbers. So the matchups is based on a lot of my experience, so there's a lot of opinion on it, and the majority of it is opinion, but some of it is common sense. Because I mean, like Sejuani, we've all already seen, she can't really deal with other junglers, so that one's it's a mix of opinion, it's a mix of fact and whatever. The point is, the matchups, take it as opinion, add your own input, and as far as it is right now, it's still kind of a rough draft, so don't crucify me just yet. Now, for those who don't understand what matchups are, it's sort of like a list you create out of which character versus another character, one character versus another character, who has the advantage, based on the assumption that both players are of equal skill. What character will have the advantage over the other one, like Jax versus, I don't know, Misfortune, next Splasher that's coming up. Which character beats which other based on, out of 10 matches. If you were to put both equally skilled players 1v1 versus each other, then like Jax won 7 out of 10 times, and that means he has a 7-3 matchup versus Misfortune. Now, the closer they are to 5-5 means it's less drastic. A 6-4 matchup isn't that dramatic. It just means that the character shouldn't lose most of the times. 7-3 is more this character has a definitive advantage, and as it grows and grows, it's just it becomes more apparent. Like in a fighting game, there's some characters that should never ever lose to an equally skilled opponent using another character. Like, that's just the assumptions you make. Match lists are made with assumptions, and I know it's hard for this game because this is a team game, which is why this game has something that I've dubbed amplifiers. And now amplifiers, they change the matchup. And we all know what these are, because these are variables in the game. Oftentimes people will say like, oh, but if you give this character a good leash, but with red buff, but with this, or with exhaust, yeah, those are amplifiers. Like Shyvana can't gank a lane properly, but let's say her teammate has a stun, that's an amplifier to her ganking powers. If she has, exhaust on her, that amplifies her ganking powers more. If those weren't there, then her, all she's got is her kit to help her out, and her kit doesn't help much out for ganking. So you get where I'm going with this. Amplifiers are in this game in many forms, and they are being taken into account in a side category. Everyone reacts to an amplifier differently. Like, some characters don't get much of an increase in strength compared to others, depending on the amplifier. Let's say, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be afraid of a Cho'Gath with a blue buff as much as you'd be afraid of a Cassiopeia with a blue buff. That's an example. You wouldn't be as afraid of a Soraka with a red buff as you'd be afraid of an Ezreal with a red buff. Like that. Some characters respond to them differently than others. So therefore, some characters have greater amplification by the amplifiers. Yeah, like I say. A good example is this of Master Yi. His matchups are generally negative. Like, he's got no CC, he's pretty squishy, and when it comes to ganking a lane, it's pretty miserable. He's got a gap closer, but, it's a big, I'm going to appear right here, you can explode me or whatever. However, he's a character because of his extremely high spiking damage and, steroids, and just how, you all know, he just tears people to pieces. He amplifies really well. Give him a red buff, an ambushes someone, gets a couple free hits on it. That matchup, those negative matchups he had are out the window. He'll just tear them to pieces. Some characters have the annotation of very high amplification. That just means that if they have exhaust, if they have the all like red buff or these other amplifiers, then those matchups become less important. Their power is just overlaps it. Some characters like let's see. Like Fiddlesticks, he doesn't do well with amplifiers because his ganking is all very sustained damage. He has his CC fear and everything. It doesn't matter that he has a red buff because he's not making advantage of that. He's just draining something. He surprises you and then drains you. He's like, okay, he doesn't really get much of an increase of damage from that because he's channeling the damage. It's the same thing as if you guys kind of just face at each other. So like he doesn't do well with those. So amplifiers are kind of the deal breakers, the situational ones, the ones you'll see in an actual game, and that's how this works out. The matchups, they aren't useful if you just consider 1v1 situations, but if you because this is a team game after all. How they would be useful in my opinion, or how they're gonna tell you. They'll tell you what you have to work on. Mastery, for instance, I already said, having pretty negative matchups, it's gonna tell you that Mastery has pretty bad matchups against pretty much almost everyone he's gonna face. However, his amplification is incredibly high. Well, does this tell me I have to work my ass off to make sure I obtain as many of these as possible when I'm trying to do these things? And this is what it's gonna tell you. It's gonna tell you like how hard you're gonna work in this game to make that not count. Of course, if your opponents are less skilled than you, this doesn't matter. This is again the assumption that you both are equally skilled, which is the assumption you should always be making because you don't want to underestimate your opponents, and then get your ass beat for that. So there. And on the other hand, if you have a clear advantage, this is what you would take into consideration. Like, this is Master Yi. I know this stuff, these amplifiers are what he wants to obtain, and that's what he's gonna use to kill me or destroy me. This is what he needs to look for. Now I know, what to avoid doing or what to keep him from getting, so I can, maintain this advantage of mine. So there, like that's how it's gonna work. Okay. And this is a very important thing to note. Just because a character has an advantage over another doesn't necessarily mean you will always get to enact it. And if you don't enact it, then the matchup didn't matter at all. Whether it was because you were too lazy or whether the opponents didn't let you. Like Shyvana being a very brutal invader and kicking the ass of other junglers. Yeah, that stuff is awesome that she can do that. But the enemy team can also keep her from doing that, therefore amplifying their own jungler's abilities. Because Shyvana couldn't do anything, making their junglers match up a lot better. So it's a team game, and amplifiers are what's going to matter, and identifying those is important, and that's what the new series that I'm creating that you all said you enjoyed and want. The matchup one is going to cover for every character. Like I'll detail it. Like Lee Sin, it would cover his favorable matchups, his unfavorable ones, etc., etc. It might cover the little crazy ones like Shaco, because Shaco is Shaco. He's kind of crazy, and you gotta be specific when you fight him. And then it will talk about his favored amplifiers, because Lee Sin doesn't care about blue buff, but he sure loves his red buff. Lee Sin can start off with any item, but boots totally help him out. That kind of stuff. That's what it will detail. And these will take into account real game situations, not just my regular jungle, no leash, break things, la la la. These will be more realistic, and these are the kinds of ones you would want to see. And I can't guarantee how long they'll be, but I'm leaning towards they'll likely be around each 5 minutes. Okay. With that out of the way, the matchups were considered with how the average of how many characters they would be able to kick their ass when it comes to either ganking for the lanes or dueling when it comes to the junglers, or just just making their day miserable. Like Jarvan, there is no character he cannot gank, and some people cannot escape his ganks. That's why he scored an S. Just like Alistar. It's like, if Alistar comes in, he can do something to you. Whether, you have all these things to subvert him, yeah, he probably could still do something to you, and in ways that will make you miserable. And Jarvan too. Then there's characters like Lee Sin. Like, no matter what you do, he can do something to you to make your day miserable when it comes to jungling. Or when laning. He has got S on both. He's an awesome guy. That's probably why he's considered overpowered. So, with the matchups being considered, things will change up and down. I may make mistakes in the first this tier list, and if you have anything, anything to bring up to me, please bring it up to me in a polite manner, and that's how I'll read it, and I'll consider things. Now, it's a lot of work, but thanks for listening.